Hi everybody, I'm going to be showing you how to make your Wheel of Fortune. You'll receive your pack with all the stuff in it that you need, and that will include this set of instructions, your template. You should also have a piece of A4 card, and for this particular task you're going to need your motor, and you're going to need a cable tie, which you'll also find in your bag. So this is your cable tie here. Okay. To begin with, what we're going to do is we're going to stick your template onto your piece of cardboard, and for that I'm just going to use Pritt Stick, and I'm going to put it onto the paper. Okay. Now it's important that you get the paper stuck around these areas and around the edges. We're going to be cutting this in half, so you'll have two separate pieces. So it's really important that you have that certainly glued around those edges and on these bits here where you're going to be cutting and folding. So I'm just going to concentrate my glue on those areas. So I'm just going to go all the way around. You'll notice I'm not putting lots on. I've not got my glue wound up too much. And again around those areas because we're going to be cutting. Outside and a bit in the middle. Okay, it's not tons. I'm just going to stick that on. Now when you're sticking it on, you don't want any air bubbles if you can help it. So lining that up and then using the back of the palm of your hand just to flatten that out so that we don't get any air bubbles, and putting quite a lot of pressure on there, like that. Okay, now when you've reached that stage and it's all stuck on and it's quite flat, you then need to cut it. Now I'm guessing your teacher will have given you a craft knife already, because you're going to need a craft knife to cut these intricate details. Okay. When you're using your craft knife, it's really important that you don't have the blade really far out, because that's going to make the blade weak and it could well snap when you're using it. So you want to have just a little bit of the blade there, and you'll also find a safety catch that you need to pull back, and that will mean that when you're putting pressure on that blade it's not going to move. You're going to need a safety ruler, a steel rule. We've got these in school, and I'm just going to line that rule up, and you'll notice that I've now stood up, and the reason I'm standing up is because I've got lots of power in my shoulders that I want to use, and that's really going to help me cut in a nice straight line. So I've got my index finger on the top of the knife, and I'm keeping my wrist quite low. So I'm not up like this, because if I'm up like this I'm going to get a rip. I'm going to end up ripping the paper. So I'm keeping my wrist nice and flat, and I'm up against that steel rule, and I'm pulling it nice and slowly towards me. You should always cut towards you and not in any silly direction, because if you go in a silly direction you're going to make your cut quite weak. You've got a very strong arm when it's coming towards you. So I'm going to get rid of that one just for a moment. We don't need that one. So now what we're going to do is, having a look at these lines, you'll notice that some of the lines are dotted and some of the lines are solid. Okay, so we've got some dotted lines and some solid lines there. The dotted lines, whenever you see a dotted line, it's always a fold line, always a fold line, and the solid line is the line that we're going to cut. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do some folding first, and then I'm going to cut it, and then we're going to just harden up those folds afterwards. Okay, so to begin with I'm going to start folding those. Now I'm not using my knife, so I'm going to put the blade away, and I'm just going to put it to one side in case it gets knocked off. I don't want to hurt anybody. So I'm lining up my ruler against the dotted line, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that up, and using the back of my thumb I'm just going to, or my thumbnail, I'm just going to press that fold against the ruler, so I'm getting a nice solid clean fold like that. So I should be able to take my ruler away and I've got a nice solid fold. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. So pulling it up, I should maybe put a little bit more glue on there. I think it's coming off. Okay, and using the back of my thumbnail, pressing along that dotted line. It's really important that you do this as accurately as you can. Those dotted lines are in a certain place for a reason. They're measured to be in the correct place, so don't just do it anywhere. You need to try and do it on that dotted line. Okay, now I've done that, I can now bend it in the opposite direction. That's bending nice and easily now, right along there. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing for that one. Bend it in the opposite direction and press along there. Okay, now I've done those are our main folds. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut along these solid lines. Now again, I need my craft knife, safety catch, and I've got my steel rule. It's important that I'm keeping my fingers away from that edge. I'm not going to have my thumb there because obviously we don't want to have any accidents. So again, wrist down. I'm actually going to make that slightly longer because my ruler's in the way. Wrist down, index finger there, and firmly using the tip of my knife, pulling that towards me, and I'm just being really careful to make sure I stop exactly where I need to stop. I'm not going to go any further than that dotted line along there. So I'm just going to use that now against the steel rule to cut out along those lines. Got my index finger on the top there, over twice, like that, and the next one. Making sure that I stop at that line. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is to do this square here. So again, lining up my steel rule, using the tip of my blade in there. And I'm rotating my work round rather than turning myself round. You should always be using your knife towards you. Oh, that's that come out now. I've done those 4 sides. Okay, the next one we're going to do is this one here. Now you'll notice that it's only got the solid line on 3 of the sides, and that is because we need to be making it so that it is a button that it sort of is folded on one side. So I'm just going to again use there on that line and along this line, and then the third line is this one here. And then what you should be able to do then is just to pop that up. That's fine. Okay, you don't want to stretch that necessarily, but just so that it's loose but it's still attached on one side. Okay, so after you've done that, you then need to put your knife away safely. So I'm just putting that down. And we're going to use these folds. You'll notice that there's a dotted line here, so we need to fold that one. Now we couldn't fold that one before because it wasn't cut, but we can do now. So what we're going to do is we're going to just line up our ruler there. Okay, and in the same way, lift up your work, and from behind, just push on that little middle section there. Okay, you don't want to bend the whole lot, just that middle bit. Now this is a little bit fragile, but it'll be okay. Okay, now from your previous fold, you should now be finding that it can fold like that. Okay, and that's what we need to achieve. Now we're actually not going to use this side, we're going to use the other side, because the other side hasn't got those lines on, and it means that when we apply our decoration we're not going to see. Now the whole point of this bit here is that actually needs to go in the opposite direction, because that's going to be a bed really for our motor to sit in. So we've got our motor here, and that needs to be able to sit on there like that, and you can see that that sits quite nicely. So that's the direction. So you really need to make sure that you've got those folds in the correct direction like that. When you're confident that that's in the correct place, you can check it with the people around you to make sure that that you've got it right. We're going to use our cable tie to attach it on. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just going to feed that from the back up through there. Okay, it's a little bit tricky, but it's all right. Okay, and feeding it through and down into the other side. In fact, what we could do is maybe just take, no, that's okay. I was going to say, you could take your motor out and then put it back in and you thread that through. Okay, so then keeping that in position, what you want to do is, you see these two little metal sections here, we're actually going to be attaching wire onto there, so you want to make sure that they are flat against the back and they're not upwards like this, not like that, but actually horizontal. Okay, and I just turn that around so you can see, and then I'm just going to feed that through. Now I would suggest you don't do it too tightly to begin with. Now it reaches a point where it begins to make that noise. You will not be able to get this undone again. Once it starts to make that noise, there is no way that you're going to get that back in the opposite direction. So make sure it's in the correct direction first. Make sure that your motor is in the correct place before you tighten it too much. Now you can see mine's actually come out, so I'm just going to feed that back in. So I'm feeding that back in, making sure that my two little metal pieces are in the right place, and now I can really tighten it. You could maybe get somebody near you to help you if you need to work in a pair, that's absolutely fine. So that's just going to keep that sort of steady, like that. And that is that section complete, and we're now going to move on to our soldering.